The version of me that I am here today, where I feel like very confident a lot of times and very sure of myself and able to like talk to people and things like that, it has not always been this way. Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Jacob. Welcome back to Sunday Yap Session, the show where every Sunday I hop on here and yap at you all about something with some sort of cohesive through line to carry us all through, and sometimes we do better than others. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a like because that helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I upload at least once a week and sometimes more. Limoncello LaCroix today. Let's get into it. And today I want to talk about like the male loneliness epidemic, just the general state of men right now, and how I largely feel that it is the obligation of other men or other people who are perceived to be men. We're gonna get into where I feel like I fit into this in just a second, but the role that men are going to have to play in helping men out of this. And I know my audience is largely ladies and non-binary people, so before y'all click off, I'm trying to fight for y'all too, and for me as well. And this is largely informed by some conversations I've been seeing both online and in person about just like the general state of manhood, how men, and I think society as a whole, but men specifically, are growing more and more disconnected with each other, are having inabilities being able to connect with each other on a genuine level, and just kind of all of these other problems that are kind of juxtaposed with like the shift of our country in general, but the shift of men to kind of these more right-wing conservative ideologies that are catering to their desires and the ways that they've kind of been primed to be in a lot of ways. And so I kind of just want to dive into that as a whole, because I think that like, as someone who has lived more of my life than not as a man, if y'all are just clicking on this for the first time, I am non-binary, but I am also very aware of the way I look, and it's giving man a lot of the times. In the summer, it's given a little bit more he, she, we, they for Home and Mistress Isabel Brooks fans. But I am someone who was raised as a boy and has lived as a man who has had a lot of friendships with other men, both for the better and for worse, and am in community with a lot of men, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. What I've been seeing a lot lately online and in person in some of these conversations as well is people that are kind of identifying that this is an issue that men are experiencing, which I think is good and is in a step in the right direction. But then I'm seeing a lot of these same men who kind of identify the problem and see what is wrong with the current state of men, or just like the current challenges men are facing with like finding community, building relationships that aren't toxic, connecting with like women and having like genuine healthy connections with women, so on and so forth. I'm seeing a lot of like critique and a lot of pointing fingers at women and suggesting that like women need to be nicer to men to pull them out of these pipelines and to pull them out of these ideologies, and suggesting that like, I think either directly or inadvertently, and these people aren't aware of it, suggesting that like women are somehow the cause of the male loneliness epidemic or something like that, or that they're like the only ones that can fix that. And I really want to push back against that and offer some alternative ways to think about that, especially if you are a man or someone who has lived a life of a man for some amount of time that has managed to like get out of it and kind of break free of this like prison that masculinity and manhood is in a lot of ways. And not to say that masculinity and manhood is inherently a bad thing. I think there are a lot of men I know who are very masculine, very comfortable in their masculinity, and are like manly men or whatever, but like have like healthy communication skills, have healthy friendships, are able to talk to women and not treat them like objects, you know, like the way that men should be acting in this society. And I think there is a responsibility and an obligation that I personally feel to be a part of that solution, because it is not women's job to fix men. And I think for a very, very long time, a lot of women have been doing things that have been trying to help men. I think in a lot of the interactions I see and a lot of like things I'll see men say, like especially these men that have kind of gone down these pipelines and are very jaded against women, so on and so forth, it's become very clear to me that a lot of these men are not interested in listening to women and are not going to hear women out, even if they are going to lay the blueprint very clearly for the things that they want to see to have relationships with men. Like, as someone who's kind of like in the middle and like an outsider looking into a lot of these dynamics, like I see women all the time getting online talking about their negative experiences with men, getting online talking about their negative dating experiences, getting online and talking about like what they'd like to see different, what they're looking for, things that give them the ick, so on and so forth. If women talking about these things was going to be the solving for the problem, I think we are in an age now where these problems would be fixed. It is not difficult at all, like I mentioned, to find women talking about their lived experiences. I think a lot of men just do not want to hear about it from women. They want to hear it from other men, which is why you have these like alpha male dudes like your Andrew Tates and your Logan Pauls and blah, 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 that these men are like flocking to listen to, rather than like the people that they are like allegedly after. And even taking it outside of women too, I think for men that are trying to find like healthier friendships and build community and things, they're going to these same sort of people that do not have healthy friendships. A lot of these like alpha male like influencers and stuff about the men that they are spending time with are the men that they are grifting with to play off of y'all lonely, insecure men and get money from y'all. Y'all know exactly who I'm talking about. These kind of like alpha male, like masculinity coach, dating coach podcasts. Look at them off like their screens. Look at them outside of like the things they're producing. Do they have friends? Do they have girlfriends? Do they have wives? Do they have community? And do they have like things that they aspire to and things that they are happy with that aren't like grifting and flashing their wealth and things like that? And so if so many people are willing to listen to these like jokers very clearly perform and grift and profit off these insecure men and not listen to the women and like queer people and so on and so forth that are very candidly, honestly, and genuinely talking about their experiences and telling them what they want to see, I think it is very clear to me that there is a very prominent role that men who have gotten out of this need to play in fixing this problem. Because as someone who's in community with women, who talks to women all the time about these sort of things, both because I'm just interested in how they feel, and also I am someone who is sympathetic to a lot of the issues that men are going through right now. And I'm going to clarify exactly what I mean about that in a minute, because I am not giving men a free pass or an excuse for the way they behave, but I understand some of the societal motivations as someone who's gone through it. But before I even get into that, I do want to say, I feel like, guys, if you are listening to this, a lot of women have given up on y'all. If you are not aware of that, a lot of women just do not want to deal with this stuff anymore. I think if you look at the history of all of the horrible things that women have gone through under men, and kind of this unique moment where we're in now, where, I mean, obviously there are still a lot of barriers of like misogyny and glass ceilings and things that we need to break through. But in the grand scheme of things in history, we have reached a time where we have reached as close to equity, I would argue, than we have at any time in history. And I think as things get better for women, and as the fruits of the labor of all the work that all these women have been doing over generations and generations and generations starts to kind of come to fruition, and things are getting closer and closer to being somewhat equitable, there is not a lot of incentive for women to look back and pull y'all out of the trenches too, especially for how horribly they've been treated. And kind of going back to what I was talking about before, like some of these men feeling like women kind of like don't treat them well and don't speak to them kindly and things like that, and that's why there's like this male loneliness epidemic and so on and so forth. I think we're in a unique moment too, where like women have been able to vocalize these things and to talk about them very freely and candidly and openly without as much like negative repercussions as you would in the past. Back in like ye olden days, if women were talking like this, they might get their property taken away because they didn't have any rights to own property or things like that. Like, it has become more and more safe for women to express these feelings that have been kind of bubbling and like needed to be talked about for generations and generations. So I also don't understand why some of y'all expect women to like turn around after all the progress they've made and be like beckoning you into the future as well. They got their own success they need to focus on. But like I mentioned, as someone who has lived a life as a man for more of my life than not, has been in community with a lot of men, and have unfortunately seen men kind of go into these different pipelines, become like closeted, locked up in their rooms, and like searching for community, searching for friendship, and like not able to find these things. I am sympathetic to a lot of the things that men are experiencing right now. And also just because in the same ways that like a lot of communities are societally and culturally conditioned to be a certain way, I do think a lot of the issues that men are facing right now is a result of generations and generations and generations of encouraging these kind of like toxic, very limited scope perspectives and ideas of what a man can be, especially when it comes to like making genuine connections, building healthy friendships, so on and so forth. And even as someone who like has been in therapy for quite a while, isn't identifying as a man anymore, and has largely had a lot of success in these areas, these are things I struggle with as well. So like I look at these situations and I do feel empathetic, and I do feel very strongly that people that identify as men, have lived lives as men, do have some obligation to pull these men kind of out of these trenches and out of these dark spaces, or at the very least like work at having conversations about a lot of these things. Because I think, and this is one of the main things I want to talk about today, I think if more men took more agency over their lives and took more agency over like getting out of these kind of cycles of loneliness and these cycles of like negative self-perpetuating systems that a lot of men are like locked into, and I've been in as well for limited amounts of times as well, I think we could make a lot of progress. Because this is something I've talked to so many men with, and I think largely I want to talk about just like the community and the friendship building aspect, because this is something I have a lot of experience with. I've been friends with a lot of lonely men. A lot of men who feel like they don't have a lot of in-person community, that are largely in like online spaces. A lot of men that have like a lot of feelings and like just negative life experiences that they need to express, that they feel like they can't express to other men. And I feel like a lot of what comes up in these are like issues and challenges that a lot of men experience, especially men that are also in community with each other, and largely just like the thing that needs to change is like one of them taking initiative. I think specifically like talking about their feelings is something I see that's in a lot, or just like building community, like I said too. And I think a lot of times they end up talking to me about this because I am someone who ends up being someone who has a lot of the things that a lot of these men want. I am someone who has quite a few very healthy, strong friendships. I have a lot of friendly, healthy, strong relationships with women specifically. I am largely able to communicate my feelings when I need to, although that's a work in progress that I'm going to probably be working on for the rest of my life. And the thing that I end up just talking about over and over again is how much intentional effort this takes, and how much like vulnerability and how much work this takes. And I think like a lot of them unfortunately don't want to hear that. I think that there are a lot of men, especially these ones that are kind of in these like chronically online spaces, and that's not a judgment, girl. I've been there too. I've been trenched in the Discords. We'll talk about that another day sometime, but like I think there are a lot of men that don't seem really interested in taking a lot of agency when it comes to loneliness and things like that, and for some reason sort of think that like someone is just gonna like show up to their house and pluck them out of their room, out of these like Discord servers and things like that, and that is going to be like the solution to their loneliness. And I think sometimes when I talk about like largely it just takes a lot of effort and a lot of persistence, sometimes that comes off as annoying, because I do think part of the reason why we're having this male loneliness epidemic and why so many of these men feel jaded and lonely is because they have tried. Maybe not as much as I think they should be, but I do think a lot of these men like have tried to make a concerted effort to like talk to their friends, to like build relationships, so on and so forth, and either like have been rejected, have had like negative experiences just in general, or have run into like issues that kind of mirror what they're experiencing. Like other men have not really been receptive, have not like done their own kind of internal work to like be someone who can communicate healthily, to have friendships that aren't just centered around like a video game or like a sport or things like that, and like actually connecting on a person-to-person level. And so they feel like, okay, well, I've tried this like a couple times before, it never works, I'm just gonna be lonely, I guess. And I always find these conversations really interesting from my perspective as someone who is Black, who is very openly queer, and who is living in like Oklahoma, because I've been able to find so much community, able to find so many friends, and have so many healthy relationships despite all of those barriers, and despite usually 99% of the time as I'm walking around and navigating my life being the only person like me in a room. And so it does feel kind of like interesting sometimes that men feel this way so often, especially white men, because y'all like are largely the majority in a lot of these spaces. So I do find it interesting that like so many men do feel like defeated, but that is something I'm hearing quite a lot. Like I feel like a lot of men find like the vulnerability and like the need to put yourself out there to be really, really intimidating. And like I said, probably have like a number of negative experiences where they've tried to do that and it hasn't turned out well, and have kind of like given up on it. And I think largely like these things are like an ongoing pursuit you are going to have to do over and over and over again. I am not someone who just like is friends with the people that I grew up with from like a very early age. My friendships have kind of gone in cycles, and as I've, you know, grown and evolved and found new interests and found new things that I want to do and have developed and grown as a person, like I have had like various, I guess, like generations of friendships essentially, and that has required me putting myself out there, going to spaces, trying new things, talking to new people, and being very open and honest and vulnerable like with myself and who I am, and taking the initiative to meet new people. Granted, I think for me to some degree it does come a little bit easier than some other people because I am very like outgoing just in general. This whole channel is built around just me like turning on the camera and yapping. Like I do not have a problem talking to people. Like I will yap your ear off all day. So honestly, like if you're willing to listen, like we've probably got the foundation for a friendship right there. But like I think sometimes a lot of the men I talk to, I get a sense that they feel like the circumstances they're in and kind of the traits that they have, and maybe the inability to talk to people, or the nervousness they feel, or like the guardedness they feel about expressing themselves, is something that is like fixed and cannot be changed. The version of me that I am here today, where I feel like very confident a lot of times and very sure of myself and able to like talk to people and things like that, it has not always been this way. Largely, I have like crafted the person I wanted to be off of like the things I value, the things I'm interested in, and the kind of way I want to live my life. And that's like why I feel bad for these men so many times, and why I just like do have a soft spot in my heart for like the circumstances that they're going through, because I do think so much of it is just like, if you would be a little bit more vulnerable, especially with other men too, because like I'm saying, I think other men need to be the ones talking to other men about this. I think I have found so much success like talking to other men and kind of coaxing them to like talk about these things and like express themselves and how they're feeling and things like that. And like, I don't know, it's kind of like one of those things where like, I don't don't know. I feel like I've had this moment so many times where like I'll be watching a YouTube video or like I'll watch like a presentation or a speech or something like that, and someone will talk about something that like I've been feeling for such a long time and I've never really heard somebody express it, and then they express it, and then it becomes easier for me to navigate because I know at least one other person has gone through it. I think if men kind of did that sort of thing for other men, I think that these things would get better very rapidly. If men would just talk to other men and be like, hey, I am lonely, I am struggling to find friendships, I am struggling to find community, are you feeling this too? So many of these problems could be fixed if men would just like be in community with other men and be vulnerable about how they feel. And like I said, I feel sympathetic because so many men have been primed to not be this way. And this is something I've had to like break down in my own personal life as well. And as I like go through therapy and kind of learn more about like myself and how I interact with people, I will see this. Like I'll notice I'll be talking to some of my guy friends and like I'll want to express like how much I love them and how much I care about them and I'm grateful for them. And like sometimes I'll be talking and it like slips into me kind of like being sarcastic and talking about it in like a jokey kind of way as like a shield for the vulnerability. Or like more so in my life, honestly, like feeling like I have to go through like everything by myself and then I can't like talk to other people about things or like reach out to other people for help and like express how I'm feeling and see if other people are going through it. Like I think for men, this is something that is going to be such a challenge and something that like collective community was going to be so important when overcoming and like modeling for each other too. I think for men too that have kind of gone through this or are living like successful lives and aren't dealing with like this male loneliness epidemic and like kind of the negative sort of cultural framing that men have been kind of put in a lot of ways. I think also along with the things I've expressed previously, checking other men when it comes to things like misogyny, when it comes to sexism, racism, homophobia is so important as well. And I wish more men would do this too, because I think alongside kind of the stuff I expressed previously, part of the problem is that I think so many men are letting other men's behavior slide. And I understand like it is annoying to be like the woke friend and like the buzzkill who's always like, oh, well, like you shouldn't be saying that, you shouldn't be doing that, so on and so forth. But again, a lot of these men, especially straight white men, are not going to listen to anybody other than other straight white men. So y'all need to be checking this stuff. And this is something I'm doing on the regular because like I said, I am in community with men. There are a handful of groups of men that I hang out with very, very regularly. And this is something I'm having to do all the time, especially when it comes to misogyny. These kind of isms, if you are someone who believes that like these things are wrong and do not have a place in society, especially when you're engaging with men, I think we have a responsibility, or not, I know we have a responsibility to call these things out and not just like let them slide because it's like boys being boys and like this is what we do with the boys. The numerous conversations I have had with other men about them saying things that are misogynistic or talking about like women in a degrading way or like having double standards for men and women, so on and so forth. Like this is something that needs to like constantly be checked. This is not something that you can just like let kind of be underlying in society and just sort of be okay with, because that's how these things sort of perpetuate and that's how we get these like guys that do all these horrible things and then are like surprised. Like I think like accountability is going to be so important for like healing the society and like dealing with all of these issues. And I think honestly too, and maybe this is just kind of because the circles of men I'm in, like I'm not dealing with like the worst of the worst, the struggling like alpha male sort of types or whatever, but like I do have a few friends that I feel like depending on who they are community with could go one way or the other. And I think honestly, largely, I think a lot of men are like scared to kind of check this behavior, but at least in my experience, I feel like a lot of men have been pretty receptive when I call these things out. Because to the point of like talking about these things and needing to have conversations out in the open, I think a lot of men either consciously or subconsciously also understand and realize that there is like something wrong with the current state of like manhood and masculinity, and there are some things that could be improved, and do find like hanging out with other men that are like deeper in the trenches with these things is an unpleasant experience and find themselves not wanting to be in community with other men and so on and so forth. So I do think that like there are a lot of men who are really receptive, and like should we be having to do this work and talking to them about these things? No, but like men should be doing it before anybody else should. If you are in your social circles with men and you make it very clear like, hey, these things are not acceptable if you're wanting to be in community, there is so much more incentive to like actually perform this way and do these things. I think like shame is something that needs to be like used very like particularly, and is not something that should just be like weaponized and thrown and so on and so forth. But when it comes to like making misogynistic jokes, making homophobic jokes, so on and so forth, like I think it is very powerful, and I've seen it work a lot of times with these men, making it very very clear that like that is something you should not be proud of, is not welcome in your social circle, and like basically shaming them and being like, hey, like if you want to be in this community, you cannot do this, is such a powerful motivator to like change and like do better and be better. And while that shouldn't necessarily be like the motivation that like makes you do better, I do think, you know, it's a step in the right direction for some of these men to think like, oh, like if I want to have friends, I need to not speak negatively about women because these people are not going to want to hang out with me if I don't stop doing that. Largely just what I'm trying to say is like, I think men also, alongside being vulnerable with other men, need to make it very clear like what is and isn't acceptable, and not just like let stuff slide because of worry about like being too woke or being too progressive, blah, 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 blah. Because in a lot of ways, it does feel like coddling. I do feel like there are a lot of men I have talked to who like, I will check them on these things and be like, hey, I saw you saw this too. Why didn't you say anything about this? And they're like, well, I didn't want to like rock the boat or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, do you want us to have a better, more equitable society or not? Like that is your obligation and that is your responsibility to be doing that. I feel like this was so rambly and so cohesive, but like honestly, like I'm saying, like if you're a man watching this, I feel like we just need to have this as like a chit chat conversation. There's so much more I could say. So if this is something y'all want to hear me talk about more, I have endless thoughts about all of this. If you are a man, please comment below and talk about how you feel about these things. If you agree with me or disagree with me in general, I want more conversations about these things out in the open. So please drop a comment below. I would love to hear that. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give it a like because it helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I upload at least once a week and sometimes more. I'll catch you later.